The White Sox have made losing a habit, but this latest defeat was painful, and literally for Mike Tauchman. Let's discuss the unusual way the Sox lost and how this could be an example of historic losing to come next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert at SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already, and also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Well, variance going back in the White Sox favor was one reason the team was just projected to lose 100 games. But through 11 games, you're seeing variance still hates the Sox, especially in the unusual way the team lost that I want to discuss in the first segment. Then a listener emailed me asking me for my thoughts on the job Will Venable is doing early in his tenure. And I'll discuss how it's hard to do since there's not much to work with, especially with the injuries piling up. And finally, I'll discuss why I'm fine with Omar Narvaez getting the call up to replace Korey Lee over top catching prospects Edgar, Quero, and Teel. So variance was one of the many infinite reasons the Sox lost 121 games last season. They hardly ran into a starter having a terrible game. And heck, they hardly ran into a closer or a bullpen having a bad game. They had just 3 walk-off wins and 12 come from behind victories last year. And those are the variables regular bad teams usually run into to pick up at least 60 wins. You know, usually 60 times in a season, you're going to face either a combination of a starter just having a bad day, a team having a bunch of errors, the opposing team, the bullpen just falling apart. And that just did not happen a lot for the Chicago White Sox last season. Again, that speaks to the factory standards of winning in Major League Baseball. You're guaranteed to win 60. You're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that matters. And that just did not apply at all in the 2024 season because the variance factor just went completely against the White Sox. And then add in, they were poorly led and just talent deficient. And that's what gets you only 41 wins. But last night, when one of the best closers in baseball, Emmanuel Clase, did not have his best stuff, the White Sox actually had a chance to win, and they almost at least tied the game, and it still ended up in one of the most unusual ways the White Sox lost. The White Sox somehow. They loaded the bases on the finalists for the AL Cy Young, and it even looked like Miguel Vargas was going to come through in the clutch to tie the game up at 3 when he poked a 2-out single to left, right until Mike Tauchman rounds third base, and he's headed for home, and he pulls up with a hamstring injury. Probably the same hamstring he pulled in spring training that he strained, that he started the season on the 10-day IL. And for those that were wondering, again, why is this team playing guys that probably are still hurt? That scrutiny is deserved. The White Sox have earned every single piece of scrutiny. On the flip side, though, if Tauchman's saying he's ready to go, he's gone through the rehab process, and it can't hurt to play him. However, and if you want to also question why did you even have him round third and try to score for home, it was going to be a bang play, but there was a chance to score the run. And hamstrings are tricky. So that's where I actually do give the White Sox a little bit of faith there. But man, ouch. And in Mike Tauchman's case, literally. Now the team is saying he's being evaluated, but it's looking like it's going to be a hamstring strain, and he's probably going to go back to the 10-day IL. But even the Cleveland broadcast commented on how unusual it was for the Sox to lose this one. Because he gets thrown out. He got thrown out then by a country mile. He basically rounds third, almost collapses then once it starts to pull, gets up, and he tried. Give Tauchman some credit, gutted, but he just didn't have his legs, and he's easily thrown out. And it's a hard defeat when even Stephen Kwan, who threw Tauchman out at third or at home, even said, you don't want to win that way. You don't want to see a guy basically pull out muscle, and that's how you escape with the 3-2 victory. And yes, you even had the John Triffin panted, oh no call. You never, when John Triffin says, oh no, bad things are happening. So add losing a game on a game-ending injury to the list of ways the White Sox have been losing games. And also add, again, Variance just hates the White Sox. Variance is also apparently not a fan of Jerry Reinsdorf. So that's why I get those in the camp of who thought the Sox could do more historic losing this season had a point. I mean, nothing so far seems to indicate the Sox lineup has actually been reset to MLB factory standards. Nothing in the bullpen, nothing really in the rotation has really made you think, outside of maybe Shane Smith and Martin Perez, that has made you think, you know what? Yep. This offseason, the White Sox hit at least Control-Alt-Delete to get back to the factory settings. Or, they scrolled through the list and, found that, hey, you got to, this virus is so bad, you just have to completely erase the memory and restore this, figurative PC to its factory standards to have it run again. We just don't have that evidence. And some of you are in your feels that I didn't hit hard enough on the offense on yesterday's show. But the thing is, all that was done in the offseason was just going back to Moneyball minimum of just let's get guys on base, which, I was fine with. But I also pointed out they didn't bring in enough power guys or guys that can at least drive in those runs, those guys that get on base to score. I mean, that's the problem. Great. You got Mike Tauchman and Austin Slater and Josh Rojas, who have at least on-base percentages above 320 career-wise. And in Mike Tauchman's case, the good on-base percentage, the stuff that you want. Great. You got more guys that can try to get on base. But you didn't really add anybody that can actually have a good hitting with runners in scoring position. You don't have a bunch of power bats. And the power bats that you do have are the ones who are prone to terrible slumps, like Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Vaughn and Andrew Benintendi. But Andrew Benintendi is now not available for the next 10 days as he just went on the 10-day IL with an adductor strain. And, for example, in Luis Robert Jr., he is off to a terrible, terrible start. And he went 0 for 5 in the leadoff spot. He has a 154, 244, 179 slash line, and he still hasn't hit a home run. And he had probably one of the worst at-bats that I've seen in the ninth inning. I mean, that was a terrible at-bat. We've seen a little bit of better at-bats with Luis Robert Jr. I mean, he's still swinging at pitches down and away or down and in, but it's not with regularity. But that was 3 straight 98 to 100 mile an hour cutters by Emmanuel Clase down and away. And each one kept just getting more and more out of the zone. And he swung at 3 straight. He swung at 3 straight. And I believe that was out number 2. So either way, that just shrunk the margin of error for the White Sox. And to Vaughn's credit, at least, he laid off those pitches from Emmanuel Clase and drew a walk in that inning. And he did have 3 walks. So, hey, at least he got on base despite he's still at a 139, 225, 278 slash line. So that's why I'm not shocked this offense is struggling to score runs. That's why I haven't really just totally gone after them. Because it's a little bit like punching down. Now, you can accuse me of my biases with Mike Clevenger, but at the same time, I spelled out the standards for Mike Clevenger. 29 other teams have passed on him. The White Sox are the only team that seems to think he has value. He has to keep the game tied. He didn't. Okay? But I'm going to get away from those biases. And if you want me to hit on the hitting, okay. But it was poorly constructed, just like the bullpen was poorly constructed. So I don't know what to tell you. And especially they don't have the hitters capable of coming through on the end part of trying to manufacture runs. They just don't have those guys right now. And when they did, when Miguel Vargas finally came through to potentially manufacture a run, an injury popped up. Variance said, here's the middle finger. So could it get better as the season progresses? Maybe. I'm at that point where I'm sure Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Vaughn won't hit under 200 all season, but I'm not convinced that they will hit above 240 either. When the offense was constructed to get on base, and it's in the bottom 5 of doing it to start the season to begin with, and you've endured the 2024 season thinking, hey, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It can't be this bad, right? And it never did. You do start to get worried that the 1916 Philadelphia A's record for the worst winning percentage is in play to be broken. Because for those that are like, well, it still can't get any worse. Yes, there's still one terrible record to break. You already have the bullpen issues. So now you can get really concerned about, is this going to be a repeat of 2024? Although the bullpen came through. So that's why you're like, man, Lady Luck just hates the Chicago White Sox. I mean, Sean Burke, he struggled again. 2 starts where he's been bitten by hanging his slider and curving the zone. He only lasted 3 innings, too, in this start, as he did struggle with his command. Baseball has officially come for him, so now he must clear the hurdle of adjusting back. And again, I'm not slamming anybody when I say baseball has come for them, because that's what baseball is. Baseball makes the adjustments. One of the way you could tell a guy is talented, he comes up and he performs right away. Or, sometimes it's the opposite and he adjusts back and that. But one way you could say, man, this guy's got some talent is he comes up and he impresses. But eventually, the book is going to get written on how to take that stuff away that he does well. And baseball comes. And now he's just got to make the adjustment back. But rookie Mike Vasil, he pitched great in 3 innings of work, keeping the game at 3-1. Penn Murphy, Frazier Eller, they also pitched clean innings. So the bullpen came through by keeping Cleveland scoreless for 5 innings. And then the Sox get the bases loaded against the best closer in baseball. And you're thinking, here we go. We got a chance. The narrative is going to be the White Sox come back. And they beat Emmanuel Clase. And then an injury. And now you're thinking, are the White Sox going to even win 40 games this year? Now, I do appreciate what James Fegan wrote on SoxMachine.com to calm your fears on if this is 2024 all over again. I want to share a few paragraphs again. Go to SoxMachine.com, get a subscription. They're great people. Josh Nelson, Jim Margulis, and James Fegan. So this is what he writes. This feels just like 2024's easy and certainly true analysis, but if Mike Tauchman pulling up on the third baseline with right hamstring tightness and getting tagged out at home to cap the White Sox 7th straight loss rather than scoring the tying run in the 9th feels merely like a phenomenon of the past 12 months, perhaps we could sell you on upgrading your Sox Machine subscription to increase your familiarity with the organization. Lenyn Sosa's first inning 2-out RBI single and Miguel Vargas coming just a healthy hamstring away from a 2-out game-tying single off all-star closer Emmanuel Clase in the 9th bookend another frustrating night for the White Sox offense that repeatedly let scuffling Guardians starter Logan Allen off the ropes. 3 for 12 with runners in scoring position, one of which was an infield single. Chase, contact, and hard hit rates would indicate the Sox offense is gradually moving in the right direction. Simpler mathematics would tell you that they have scored 15 runs over their 7-game skid and could be en route to putting 3 positional regulars on the injured list in a 24-hour span. And then I want to skip a few more down. As effectively the long reliever on this team for now, seeing 3 innings Mike Vasil means things are going either amazingly well or quite poorly. The White Sox season is less than 2 weeks old, but the expectations have been calibrated to know which one it probably is. So in one way, we're already expecting a poor season. And also, hey, at least the White Sox are eligible for the number 1 pick. So even if they do lose an historic amount of games, they have the chance to have a silver lining. But I like how he pointed out, though, too, the Sox drew 6 walks, but Sox pitching also walked 7 batters. So maybe the stretch is just the team just being out of whack and needing to be calibrated, and they're all injured. Pitching, they need to command the ball better. And, if they don't give out so many free passes, suddenly your guys getting on base at least have a chance to be more successful because the other team doesn't have so many chances to score. So if you give yourself more run opportunities, you can maybe just, win 4-2, that type of stuff. But however, it's going to be hard since the goal with the pitching is to induce weak contact. So sometimes you're throwing east-west pitches intended to be down in the zone that have the probability of being balls if they're not swung on. And that's what teams are doing right now. They're just sitting on stuff. They're sitting on things, saying you got to throw things over the zone now. And that's why not having many swing and miss pitchers is already showing its ugly head. And I do agree with Fegan, though, at this point in this specific context, it's just kind of, who knows? It's still early. You just had 3 major injuries as Tauchman randomly came up hurt as he was rounding third rather than first. I mean, if he was rounding first, well, you got yourself an oh no, but it's not amplified like with rounding third, bottom of the 9th, and would have been the tying run. Well, I want to address a mailbag question I got regarding my thoughts on the job Will Venable is doing this early in his leadership tenure, and that is next on Locked On White Sox. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. That's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients is also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. And I love that Just Ingredients prioritizes wholesome, nourishing ingredients without the artificial junk. Whether you're recovering after a workout or need an energy boost, their grass-fed whey protein and pre-workout deliver real results. I like putting their whey protein in my morning smoothies. They got really good flavors. The chocolate flavor makes your smoothie taste a little bit better. Visit justingredients.us. That's justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you have not done so already. And if you can't get the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball, venting with me. So I was emailed a question, and I want to tackle it. And again, if you want me to address something on the show or just old school pen pal talking baseball, email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. You know, I've conversed with my guys, Fat Bank or Brian, who emailed me. Brian recently wrote, Todd, what's your opinion of Will Venable so far? Do you notice any differences in the team yet? I think Will Venable will be really good if they give him time. Your thoughts on Will Venable so far? So appreciate the email, Brian. And again, guys, if you want me to tackle something, got a topic, feel free to email me or put them in the comments. I've got another one that I want to tackle tomorrow. So, don't worry on that one. I will get to your question on that. I think it was Southside Guys 88. Somebody, I'll get it. Sorry if I misquoted the whoever asked me the question about Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz, but I want to get to that tomorrow. But anyways, my first thought is I think this man must really, 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 really love challenges, because this is the biggest challenge for a manager in the history of baseball. I may be exaggerating it, but this is a huge build. And especially when you factor in an owner that doesn't authorize enough spending to overcome the team's development problem. And the organization is basically starting from scratch when it comes to developing players. I mean, think about it. Within the last, 24 months, they've brought in a director of pitching to establish standards of how every pitcher should be developed. They brought in a director of hitting to establish standards of how everybody should be hitting. And they've actually made investments in the technology that you need to develop players. Like, hey, a pitching lab to construct the best pitches possible and analyze, and video to analyze swings and all that. They just are finally doing the stuff that teams were doing last decade. And the owner won't spend enough in free agency to at least be like, hey, let's cover some time. So basically, this is the biggest build, I think, in the history of baseball. And so far, the only gaffe I can think that he's actually made was asking Brooks Baldwin to bunt in that 4-3 defeat on Sunday against the Tigers. I think it was in the fourth inning, and I talked about it on Monday. But I did lay out on this show and on SouthsideShowdown.com the 6 standards to hold him to. So I figured, why not at least get a very early check-in, even though it's been in 11 games. Let's take a look. So the first is a good clubhouse culture and a winning mentality. I had the Chicago Sun-Times Colin Williams on the show this week, and he said the vibes are still good in the clubhouse. Everybody's getting along. Everybody is pulling on the same rope. I mean, heck, you've even had Martin Perez talking about contending. He's holding guys accountable, Venable, by making simple statements. Like, again, the bullpen can't issue walks on Sunday, or you can't have Brooks Baldwin having base running mistakes. That just can't happen. There's basically been, hey, we just got to flush it. There's been no flushing of the comments like Pedro Gaffal made. You even look at Will Venable. He's got that calm demeanor, and I think a lot of those guys embrace it. Second is the team is prepared to play every game. Well, when it comes to at least defensively, according to fieldingbible.com, the Sox are in the top 10 in defensive runs saved this year. They have 16 defensive runs saved. The top 10, they're number 8. So, and the thing that I have noticed is defensive positioning. That's one way you can measure the team being prepared. And you can also measure if this research and development upgrades are working, and they seem to be in the right spot to catch the ball, especially in the infield. Even Lenyn Sosa, yes, he's had a few gaffes, but it isn't as, oh my, what is he doing out there? Because they seem to be positioning their guys correctly. And you have seen better at bats, even if they're still getting outs. So it feels like, yeah, they look a little bit more prepared. Defining the brand of baseball that this team should be playing and guys getting better. That was my standard number 3. It's still an incomplete as we're 11 games in. We're still very early in the stages of this build. However, the 2 wins the Sox have had meets what you should be doing when playing at right field to win games. Hit the ball deep, play clean defense, and get good pitching. That's what won a World Series 20 years ago. The only problem was the organization kept thinking the marginal stuff stayed the same for the last 20 years. Like, again, not using technology to develop players, not having a viable pitch lab to actually construct better pitches, data and analysis for defensive positioning, valuing OPS over on-base percentage, as the game evolved, that type of stuff. The margin stuff, that's where the Sox were have been terrible at for the past 20 years since winning the World Series in 2005. But hey, last night you saw Frazier Eller bounce back with a nice bullpen appearance. And although pitching does fall under more Brian Bannister and Ethan Katz, I do think you've seen better at bats from Miguel Vargas. At least he doesn't look traumatized out there. So at least that's a start. The next standard, being adaptable. I think Will Venable is pushing every button he can think of to try to win a game. I think he's doing whatever he can think of to potentially win a game. Even in that bases loaded game yesterday, he brings in, where you are allowed technically sometimes to declare a 5th infielder. He brings in Brooks Baldwin, trying to play in, trying to induce, throwing out the guy at home if you get a ground ball, that type of stuff. He had Luis Robert Jr. at leadoff yesterday to try to get him going. He isn't committing to a closer because, quite frankly, he doesn't have a guy with the stuff or the mental makeup right now to handle that role. And I like how he is approaching, his bullpen approach, at least in terms of why wait to use your best relievers for what you might think, for critical outs in the 8th or 9th that might not even be there when the critical out might be in the 6th or the 7th inning. So I have no problem with that. His decisions, I would not necessarily say are costing the White Sox games. That's the next standard. You could possibly skew that Tigers defeat on Sunday to him, but I think his process was correct. When he pulled Martin Perez, Martin Perez threw 6 1 1/3 innings, 6 1/3 innings of great baseball, 3-1 lead. And even if the bullpen is talent efficient, you shouldn't be asking your starter to throw 120 pitches this early in the season. And the bullpen did get 5 of 7 outs it needed. Had it gotten all 7, he looks like a genius. That type of stuff. Now, maybe not maximizing run scoring output by asking Baldwin to bunt in the 4th inning. That could have cost the team, but they still had a 3-1 lead. You have the lead. The pitchers do have a responsibility to protect it. I don't get this sacred cow of it's got to always be on the offense because they didn't score enough runs. Yes, scoring enough runs, scoring more runs completely widens your margin for error. But on the other side, the bullpen pitcher still has a responsibility to execute. Maybe not having Penn Murphy throwing a bit more, getting ready during Shane Smith's first start also cost the Sox a win. As I keep saying, Smith's running out of gas, and that 6 was so abrupt that I don't think Bruce Bochy does anything different. Plus, the same situation happened in Smith's next start, and this time Venable uses that as a development data point, and it works. And remember, Smith's development is more important in the long run this season than wins and losses. And I think you and I will get more data on him once young studs down on the farm do come up, because that's when you can tell if guys are truly getting better. Because right now, you don't have much of anything in terms of who's going to be on the next great future team. Who right now on this roster is going to be on that 2027 roster that everybody's hoping will be good. Maybe Brooks Baldwin is the super utility guy. Maybe Miguel Vargas is your starting third baseman. Shane Smith and Sean Burke in a yet-to-be-determined pitching role. But that's about it. Maybe 4 guys. And maybe Korey Lee is your backup catcher, so maybe 5. And Korey Lee is reportedly destined for an IL stint with an ankle injury. And it sounds like the White Sox are going with a veteran call-up instead of their two young stud catchers. And I'll discuss why it's actually the right call to make next on Locked On White Sox. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or driving into player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live props into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. And I always maintain their traditional money lines, spreads, and over-unders, they're fun to play. But if you want to win big, try their futures, parlays, and props. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim $250 in bonus bets today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So I'll admit, when SoxMachine.com's beat reporter James Fegan tweeted out that it sounds like Omar Narvaez is getting called up to replace Korey Lee on the roster, as Korey Lee rolled his ankle, getting thrown out at first in the sixth inning, I was a little bit like, well, why aren't we going with Teel or Edgar Quero? And I talked about on Monday's show how it's actually good, though, that Narvaez decided to stay with the organization after not making the 26-man roster as a non-roster invite. I was even more impressed he was willing to go down to Double-A and basically be something out of Bull Durham as the old veteran tutoring the stud arms. In this case, it's going to be three arms, not just Nuke LaRouche. It's Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, and Grant Taylor. And that's why I'm fine with the Sox actually going with him as the backup catcher, despite his days of hitting big league pitching being long gone. And Edgar Quero is actually off to a hot start in Charlotte. And I would love to see Quero's bat in the Sox lineup, especially since he has a 986 OPS right now at AAA Charlotte. And I'm mentioning Quero over Teel because Teel has cooled off immensely after that first series scorching start. He has a 190 average and a 673 OPS. I'm not too worried. Just like everybody's freaking out about Colson Montgomery, I just think Colson Montgomery needs to be sat down with a come to Jesus moment and say, just play baseball. That's it. Same thing with Teel. Just play. Just go out there and play, man. And plus, I understand the assignment of why they're down at AAA, and it isn't service time manipulation. Why Teel and Quero are down there. I've discussed it a couple weeks back. Teel could still use some more minor league at bats, like what was afforded to, say, Adley Rutschman. I talked about how I think, Teel still isn't at the same volume of at bats that Rutschman got. Plus, you want Teel and Quero to get more at bats at DH, and in Teel's case, and I don't think they've done it yet, in the outfield. You want to get them some reps in the outfield because once both are up, you want their talented at bats in the lineup every day, and only one of them can catch. So you want the other two, DH, or again, in Teel's case with his athleticism, playing some outfield too. So better for them to mentally get acclimated in games that don't really count at AAA, because they don't. Wins and losses don't matter in the minors. It's nice, but nobody really cares. They care about development and performance. And remember, DHing is like 95% mental, since if you have a bad at bat, you don't have the option to go in the field and focus on something else. And a lot of guys have said that if DH, you just sit there and there's the potential to stew and stew and stew until your next at bat. And then you're all up in your feels and you're just. So that's when it's acceptable. And that's the only time it's acceptable to figuratively flush something in baseball. Build a routine of maybe studying film or doing whatever's needed to get ready for the next at bat. So get them mentally, maybe establish that routine again when the games don't matter. Although you could say the games don't matter this season. So, but in this context, you still got young pitchers on the mound who need a tutor. And you could say, yes, Korey Lee is young in his career, but the one valuable thing Martin Maldonado provided last season was he did tutor Lee in the finer points of catching, where he could be a good mentor to the young arms. So that's why I'm fine with Matt Thaiss and Lee covering the time that Quero and Teel need in AAA to still get acclimated to their, alternate roles. But you also need someone with experience at this juncture rather than the young stud, especially since baseball has come for Sean Burke and Jonathan Cannon and Davis Martin. And those guys need to make the adjustments to the adjustments. And they need someone like Narvaez to help tutor them, to know when to do that pitching mound visit, to do all that, to do all those little tiny things to help them be the best that they can be. So I'm comfortable living with the automatic out of Narvaez, because in the long run, him briefly helping Theis tutor these young pitchers through the adjustment phase, that's more important in the long run. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back tomorrow to discuss what to watch for in the Boston series, and if it's worth bringing up Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith just to get some power arms in the bullpen. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion around the Sox' unusual way to lose to the Guardians, my assessment of Will Venable's early season leadership, and Omar Narvaez getting the call up to replace the injured Korey Lee. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.